Shows this to be true. Even a 1-point change in the CX index score can impact millions of even my grandmother has heard about ChatGPT. And so it's really important that companies don't just ask, but also respond. We're urging caution in sort of turning on generative AI in a customer-facing interaction just yet.
Hello, and welcome everyone to this episode of nasscom Deep Dive podcast series. My name is Achyuta Ghosh, and I head insights at nasscom. And today, we will focus on decoding voice of customer as a business growth strategy. Companies that create exceptional customer experiences can set themselves apart from their competitors. This is nothing new. We all know that. What is different that today, technology has evolved to a point where it can translate data into real outcomes. But it takes patience and guts to really train an organization to see the world through the customer's eyes and redesign functions to create value in a very customer-centric way. But hold on, before we get deeper, we have a CX guru with us today, and she is none other than Colleen Fazio, senior analyst and customer experience leader at Forrester. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Colleen, do tell us a little bit about yourself, your career journey so far, things that you like to do, your hobbies. Let's start with that, Colleen.
The fun stuff, sure. Thanks. I'm based in the United States in the Boston area in Massachusetts, where we're still trying to get summer started here in June. It's only 50 degrees today. Once it warms up, I really like playing golf with my family and being outside. I've been at Forrester now almost 2 years. Before Forrester, I actually spent almost a decade with the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C., where I was lucky enough to work on the United Nations and travel a lot and get to do a lot of really great work in foreign diplomacy, human rights, and the United Nations. So if you want to share some travel stories as part of this podcast, I've got plenty to share.
Thank you. And I think, Colleen, if you're missing the summer, please come to India. It's in full flow.
I would love to, maybe someday.
Great. And, Colleen, I think getting on to customer experience, right? I mean, why do you think customer experience is so very important in today's world? What really makes it at the top of the CXO priority list today?
Sure. I don't think that the value of customer experience can be overstated. Some even would say that we're living in an experience economy today. And our research bears this out. Our research shows that CX performance and quality can drive customer loyalty and deliver business results. In fact, our proprietary Forrester CX index score shows this to be true. Even a 1-point change in the CX index score can impact millions of revenue. And we talk about business case for CX. There's actually like 3 very distinct categories where we can see improvements and tangible improvements. Revenue, like losing fewer customers, less churn, reducing cost, so reducing customer support cost, for example. And then a third category, which is a little bit harder, but also really important, which is resilience or risk. Improving the employee experience to retain that high value staff. So there's less risk, right? Less churn, it's predictable. For example, there's a energy company in Scotland called Scottish Power. And they lowered financial risk by decreasing customer churn by 31%. Similarly, there's a software company, Deltek, that redesigned their online knowledge portal to make it more useful. And so they saw less support case deflection. So there's real tangible examples of how CX can help the businesses grow.
Great, Colleen. And I think these are very great examples of how to look at CX, not only through one particular lens of customers, right, but the overarching impact it has on an organization and addressing so many other challenges also.
Yes. Yeah, it's really, CX is an organizing principle for the organization. You can talk about, your CX vision and your strategy, and it really helps everyone align behind a common goal. And how do we want to show up for our customers? And CX can really help people understand what good looks like.
And do you see any difference between pre-COVID and post-COVID? Do you see an increased importance, or do you see a really step change that organizations are thinking of when it comes to CX now as compared to, say, 2019, 2020?
I think that COVID changed experiences in a lot of ways with, as you know, like the rush to digital transformation and everything kind of being online. A lot of companies had to rethink their customer journeys. They had to rethink what experience meant if their experience was no longer human to human. I think we're seeing some normalization now with people returning to in-person experiences and companies being able to measure and optimize again for those in-person experiences. But we'll never go back. All experiences are hybrid now. People are looking on their phones while they're shopping. So digital is more of a part of our culture probably than it was before. And it was probably inevitable, but COVID really sped that process up.
Sure, definitely. My next question to you, Colleen, is this is 2023, middle of 2023. What were the key trends that you see when it comes to CX this year? I mean, what were some trends that stood out? Trends that came in new. This is the first year that it happened, and ones that have been in the past but has become more and more important. Would you care to shed some light on that?
Sure. I don't think you can talk about trends without mentioning AI, right? Even my grandmother has heard about ChatGPT. So it's one of those things that it's going to change everything. And at the same time, I'm not sure we know how much it's going to change, right? We can't quite predict. The change is happening so fast. But I think AI is on everyone's mind, and we could talk a little bit more about that later. A perennial trend for us is ROI and the need for our CX programs to talk about ROI, as we talked about already. I think we're seeing, some of the budget constrictions and the budget economic pressures, CX is being asked to step up even more and to show value and to do more to connect, an NPS, a likelihood to recommend score, with actual customer behavior. There's a little more pressure on CX teams to get more analytical rigor in what they're doing and no longer just saying our score is X and that's enough. We really need to go deeper. And we're seeing that more, I think, as there's pressure to deliver right now. Metrics in general are always a hot topic for us. It's a perennial topic with our clients here at Forrester. We hear a lot of clients asking us, about metrics. NPS continues to be the most prevalent score that executives look to when judging CX success. And we know that based on a survey we did late last year. So maybe not a trend per se, but sort of a continuation of what we've been seeing in the space, that NPS continues to dominate. We also see a continuation of email surveys still being the number one tool that our customers tell us they're using to collect feedback, which is interesting considering the many other ways to collect feedback. These programs tend to still be relying on these older tools. I think this year we are hearing a little bit more about journey orchestration and sort of that more predictive behavior, getting ahead of what your customers need. Think about when you're taking a flight and the airline proactively texts you to say, your flight is delayed, rather than you having to go check on the app. So more of that predictive behavior, getting ahead of customer experience, is something that more organizations are trying to figure out, and trying to figure out how they measure those predictive experiences. And then finally, customer service. Customer service has for so long been considered sort of a cost center. I think customer service is starting to get a seat at the table. We know that customer service is one of the biggest drivers for CX quality, and is a major contributor to loyalty and to revenue. And our data backs that up. And finally, I think CX professionals are able to tap into that customer service data more effectively. And customer service professionals are positioning themselves more as part of the business and more as a partner, which is a trend I'm really excited to see more of.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on, Colleen, what are the different kinds of data that you see that can be used to really measure CX? What kind of different data sets that you think are available today, which was not available in the past?
Sure. We get this question all the time, like, what's new in CX measurement? How can we measure our experiences? And I think what we have to keep in mind is that there's not a lot of new ways to measure. And even if there are, so many of the customer experience teams are still stuck trying to do the basics. They're still trying to correlate customer satisfaction with customer behavior. And until you can kind of get the basics down, it's really hard to jump to that next level of, for example, using behavioral data to understand frustration. So I would really recommend for CX folks that are listening here, focus on the basics, get some basic correlations down between customer behavior and your customer experience metrics. Regardless of what metric you use, there's really three key questions that you're trying to answer with your metrics. How good was the experience? How good is the quality of that experience? How can we improve the quality of that experience? And how will we benefit as an organization from improving CX? So no matter what metric you pick, make sure that it can help you answer those three questions. Journeys, I think, are the most undermeasured part of the experience when we look at our data and we talk to our customers, and they're hard. It's hard to measure a journey and journey success and understand the drivers of those journeys. But that's something that we're really encouraging our clients to think about more. Get away from just measuring your email channel and your digital channel and your service channel, but really work on connecting those dots. And we're doing some really exciting research, my colleague Maxie and Joanna, on journey analytics and how to measure journey analytics. And I think that's really where the future of CX is headed in terms of measurement, because it really is important to understand your customer journeys, right? Oh, Achyuta, I think you might have muted.
Yeah,
there you
and
go.
I guess it's even more important given the omni-channel experiences that today organizations are trying to give to their customers, right?
Yeah. And so, people, again, as we said, jumping from mobile to desktop to the store, and it's happening so fast. We talk about the customer lifecycle almost collapsing onto itself because it's so fast. So you have to be working across silos, or else you're going to miss something. Your customer will have churned before you even know it, unless you're working together across silos to really understand what's going on.
Great. Colleen, successful companies, they pay a lot of attention, as you were saying, to what their customers are saying, understanding their perspective. What are your suggestions for organizations so that they can get the voice of customer approach right? I think this is a tricky question, but I'd love to hear your views on this, Colleen.
Yeah, this is what I spend most of my time researching, really, how to crack this voice of the customer code. And it's really exciting. There's so much value in customer feedback. Data can tell you all day long, like, what is going on with your customers. They're clicking, they're calling, but you don't get that emotion. And the emotion, as we know from Forrester's research, is such an important indicator of customer experience. And you really only get emotion by talking to people. And it's the human element of CX. It's just so important. Unfortunately, we continue to hear that our programs, VOC and CX measurement programs, are struggling. Nearly half of programs internationally tell us that their maturity is low or very low, which really reflects how difficult this is. So I'm actually working on some research now to sort of think about, what does this look like in the future? We have a model here we call LIAM, affectionately. LIAM is a name, and it stands for Listen, Interpret, Act, and Monitor, which has been our model for VOC programs for years. The problem is it kind of glazes over some of the complexity involved. As you know, a VOC program alone in a silo cannot actually affect CX change. Someone else owns the action in the line of business, in the operations center, in the storefront. VOC teams need to become more connected across the organization. They need to be connecting with market research, with experience research, with digital transformation teams. Bringing that customer voice to all of these teams is really critically important. So listening remains really important. The interpretation piece, again, connecting with other sources of data, connecting with call volume, connecting with reasons for calls, connecting with digital experience, connecting with customer behavior. The voice of the customer is incredibly valuable, but alone, it's very rarely enough to tell you what to do next. It'll tell you what happened and maybe why it happened, but you have to bring in other data to really understand how to go forward. And that's the action piece. It's all about enabling your partners across the business with more data, more information, more customer feedback, so they can take appropriate action to improve the customer experience. It's also about communication, and this is where a lot of customer feedback programs fall short. You have to communicate in a way that resonates with the business. You have to communicate in a way that syncs up with what they're trying to achieve. What are their goals, and how does customer feedback help them achieve them? And timing is really important. If you think about a team on like an agile sprint, for example, and you bring them data when they're 3 weeks into their sprint, it's a little late. You've got to make sure that you're hitting the business on a cadence that makes sense with the cadence of decision-making with the business. And finally, monitoring. That comes back to our measurement and how important it is to measure the impact of customer experience programs. Something that gets lost in there and is near and dear to my heart is the real importance of closing the loop with your customers. Customers who give you feedback really are giving you a gift. And they expect that someone's listening and acting on that feedback. And so it's really important that companies don't just ask, but also respond. And there's some really innovative ways to do that. sending emails with summaries of changes that have been made, using social media to say, hey, we heard you, here's what we're doing. There's lots of innovative ways to close the loop, but it's really important to do that as part of these VOC programs. I could talk about this all day.
Colleen, any examples you want to share? You've seen some live transformations of organizations doing it in the right manner. Anything you would like to share would be great.
Yeah, sure. From a sort of organizational perspective, like how do you actually organize to do this? We did a recent podcast with Avangrid, which is an energy and utilities company here in the United States. And they had this really great quote about putting the dreamers and the doers together on one team. And what that looks like is the digital transformation team has the folks who are in charge of the digital transformation, who are in charge of actually pushing the buttons to make things happen. But they also have the voice of the customer team on that same team. So there's this really nice interplay between customer feedback and digital transformation. That's sort of an ongoing happening process. And I just love the line about the dreamers and the doers together. I think it really helps put into concept like what we're talking about here. Another one is from Crow, which is a US financial services and accounting company. And they use employee feedback, which is an often overlooked source, a voice of the customer. Think about your employees who interact with customers all day long, whether it's your sales folks, your customer service folks, your frontline retail staff. They usually have really interesting insights about how the customer experience is going. They see things, they hear things that you're not going to capture necessarily in surveys. So what Crow does is after clients submit feedback, the employees are able to add their own notes onto those surveys to add more context and more richness. And it's part of their routine process. It's not extra work. It's just a little bit of part of their process. And these employee insights really provide more complete and timely understanding of what actually happened in that experience and really helps Crow make some advances. One more example I'll just share really quickly is from Comcast, which is a mobile phone cable provider. They discovered that there was a lot of frustration when they were doing call listening around a fee. And it turns out that there was a pretty minimal fee. It was maybe around $10 US that had to get manager approval before a customer service rep could waive the fee. And it turns out that the approval rate was like 99%. And so there was this process that was requiring approvals, but the approvals were basically a rubber stamp. But the process was causing a lot of frustration for both the Comcast employees and for the customer who had to kind of go through this extra step. And they only discovered that by listening to their calls and really understanding the employee and the customer experience. And they ultimately got rid of that step about manager approval because it wasn't adding to the experience and it wasn't adding to the business outcomes in any way, shape, or form.
Great. And I'm sure those who will be hearing this would already start picturizing their own, the changes that they would like to do to their voice of customer analysis. But just leading on from there, Colleen, what are the top 5 tips that you want to give to organizations to help them build out the CX strategy?
Oh, top 5.
Well,
CX
you can
strategy.
do top 10.
Yeah. I love this. We could do top 100. No, I think, it's really important that your CX strategy is grounded in your brand vision, right? It needs to feel authentic to employees. We talk about making your CX strategy something that's an honest representation of promises that the company makes. And we talk about making it inspiring. You want to inspire employees to take action. They understand what the North Star is and they want to go there, right? And then mobilizing. You have to make it specific too, right? Like I said earlier, what does good look like? So we say, for example, we want to make our experiences easy. What does easy mean for our organization? Because it may be different than the organization down the street. And we call that our AIM model, AIM, authentic, inspiring, and mobilizing. And the strategy needs to have a clear picture of the customer. Who is our customer? Not every organization can answer that question easily, especially like a big B2B and B2C company. So really getting clear on the experiences that you're building for and who the ideal customer is. And that might be a little bit aspirational, right? If your company's in transition, the customers that you want tomorrow may not be your customer base today. So just getting everyone aligned around who the customer is and what good looks like, right? Getting a roadmap down that has some measurable sets of outcomes. Again, back to measurement. We always talk about measurement. There's an ingredient manufacturer, like for food. The CX team worked with the functional leaders to create line of business specific metrics that align with the business's overall CX goals. Having those shared KPIs is really motivating and really helps people get on the same page in terms of the way to go. We talk about a 1-sentence business case, which I think is a really sort of easy entryway into building your sort of CX strategy and your CX business case. We talk about we want to do X thing that will improve Y thing with this outcome. And just even that one sentence business case for your CX strategy can really help people understand what we're trying to do and why, and set the goals for outcomes. So it doesn't have to be a 40-page tome, right? You can do this in sort of chunks and get it moving faster. Starting small is also really important, right?
Sure. And, I think if you look at the point that you made on, do you really know your customer? I think that kind of becomes the base effect. I mean, is the person your customer who signs on the check, who does your evaluation, who actually uses your product? And, how do you build around that? I think that's a great point that you made, Colleen. Thank you.
Yeah, B2B is hard. Is it, whose experience do you need to optimize? There's often a lot of people using a product, but only one account head. So it's important to get feedback at both levels when you're thinking about your B2B strategy there.
Right. Last question, Colleen.
Yeah.
How can organizations in this world today leverage Gen AI for CX? I mean, this is the most disruptive question today, and I think everybody's cracking their heads on what to do with it. From a CX perspective, where do you see Gen AI has a play, and how are organizations looking at it?
Yeah, it's crazy how much generative AI has taken over the conversation in the past 6 months. I would just urge some caution from CX professionals. We don't all have to jump on the bandwagon just yet, but we should definitely be paying attention, right? Forrester actually has a lot of blogs that are outside the firewall for anyone who wants to read more. There's a lot of resources that we have available. But in the meantime, my colleague Brandon writes a lot about synthetic data. And that's, data that duplicates or mimics or extrapolates from the real world. And it's really good. So the generative AI can be used with synthetic data to sort of do some modeling, especially if there's, privacy concerns with your data or data masking. It really can be helpful for training machine learning models on scenarios where there's a lack of training data. So that's the sort of technical aspect of this for CX. Second, customer service. As I mentioned before, customer service is kind of, I think, having a moment this year, and generative AI and customer service are really coming together in some real ways, I think. We're urging caution in sort of turning on generative AI in a customer-facing interaction just yet, because as we know, it can hallucinate. It's not totally tuned. So I wouldn't say, turn on generative AI and let your chatbots go running. It's a little bit risky yet. But generative AI models can help chat agents craft replies to customer questions. There's some really interesting potential use cases around helping customer service agents train, because you can train on a generative AI model that would mimic your customer rather than having to do it live, which is, kind of risky, right? There's some potential for massive savings on time in terms of after call work for agents, in terms of summary and making notes more consistent and reportable and actionable. I think there's some really exciting things that are coming faster in that customer service area. A third area is design. We've all probably played a little bit with the image generation tools, but it's more than that. It can help design the actual interactions that you can have with your customers. So really exciting prospects there. My colleague David Trogue is writing about that, if anyone wants to go chase that down. Then finally, when it kind of comes to the core CX functions, though, like creating a strategy, creating a vision, you still need humans. That's still a human endeavor that needs some humans in the loop. There are definitely some valuable things that CX can get from generative AI, again, in terms of summarization. If you have potentially a lot of unstructured data that you're trying to understand, like what are our customers talking about, there'll probably be some generative AI capabilities there to make our CX teams more effective and efficient. Also, sort of like lighter use cases, but still helping us be more efficient, is crafting CX job descriptions potentially. And so that's another thing to think about. I know that there's some vendors out there who are starting to play with using generative AI for responding to ratings and reviews. So that closed the loop workload can be heavy. And I think that there's some potential there to potentially leverage generative AI to help with some of that closing the loop, but I'm hesitant to say turn it on just yet. Similarly, there's some survey creation potential where you could tell a generative AI model to create a survey about a particular topic. And I think that the models have some potential to really help us make that process faster. But again, you still need a human to make sure that the scales make sense and the questions make sense. So again, we're not quite done yet with all of us still having jobs, but I think there's some huge efficiency gains if I had to call out sort of a top line headline around generative AI for CX.
Right. And do you have a timeline for this, Colleen? Because what I keep hearing is that these are all experiments being made. But do you see real life solutions being ready, developed? Is there a timeline that you would like to think of, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years for entire piece Gen AI driven CX to come into fore?
Oof. If I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be making a lot more money.
Me too.
Right? I think the last 7, 8 months have just been so fast and faster than we could have predicted. I think what we might just see now is some pumping the brakes as folks think about the privacy considerations and sort of, we've already seen it being banned in certain places. I think to make generative AI business user friendly, there's some regulation that has to be figured out, or how to navigate the privacy concerns. So I think we might see it slow down a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be very long. I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing, especially in the contact center, a lot of these use cases online next year. Of course, I don't know the future, so I could be wrong, but I think that there's so much momentum behind this now. We really are seeing a lot more generative AI coming our way.
Yeah, and of course there would be leaders and laggards in this space, and you'll probably see the first movers really move in quickly. But I somehow feel that this is a trend where most companies will catch on very quickly. Otherwise, they'll be
Yes.
left behind in a
Yeah,
big way.
I don't think we can avoid it, right? It's coming.
Right. I think that's that's all the questions that I had, Colleen, today. Excellent conversation. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of NASSCOM, thank you for your time and insights today. And we look forward to hosting you again in the near future.
Thank you. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.